health screenings and opportunities. So we're excited to be here amongst all of the activity. We're also here to discuss two new great exhibitions opening this Saturday, September 29th. The exhibit glorifies our Kansas landscape and features works by photographers Larry Schwarm and Brian Darby. And so here to tell us a lot more about it is Dr. Patricia McDonald. Dr. McDonald, it's all yours.
Always wonderful to have the mayor at the Wichita Art Museum, and what a beautiful fall day.
Yes.
We are always a beehive of activity, particularly today with Senior Expo here. And the staff is, we are hamsters in the wheel because we are opening an exhibition on Saturday, as Mayor Monroe said. Kansas Land, two different, really fascinating, and I would say beautiful projects about farming in Kansas. We were aware for some time that Larry Schwarm was part of a scientific research project at the University of Kansas. A number of researchers looking at land use decisions and water supply, and that group of scientists were eager to have a distinguished photographer, part of their team, to put a face to their research. Larry Schwarm is the most nationally prominent art photographer living in the state of Kansas, and it just so happens he lives in Wichita. So we were aware of that project, and within roughly the last year and a half, a second team of University of Kansas faculty members were researching a very different aspect of farming in Kansas, coming from a more sociological perspective. And when we found about the second team of University of Kansas professors who were looking at farming in our state and land use, and the second project also had a documentary photographer attached to the project, we determined at the Wichita Art Museum we wanted to be the stage for these two projects. We work as part of our mission to bring the world of art to our city, but it's important to be a stage as well for artistic activities that are happening in our city, in our region, and in our state. And so this was just a perfect opportunity for us to live out our mission. So documented photography, that's the basis of the show. Two galleries, one devoted to Larry Schwarm's project, and the second devoted to, it's a trio of faculty members who work together, Brian Darby, Tim Hosler, and Paul Stock, coming from very different perspectives, all of them equally probing and gorgeous. And if you like landscape, and you like landscape in Kansas, you need to come here. The other thing that I would say is that it's both the land, but there's incredible poignancy to the people who work the land. And in that way, I think Wichitans and people in Kansas will really respond wonderfully well to this exhibition. I'm really proud as the director of the museum that we're staging it for our audience. We've had some wonderful supporters for the exhibition. The DeVore Foundation helped us, as well as Doug Bringer, Sonia Gradaman and Chris Brunner, and Sandra Langel. We do little without the help of donors coming forward. And of course, the city of Wichita is an important part of everything that we do here at the Wichita Art Museum. So thrilled to be kicking off our fall with the exhibition we call Kansas Land. And always happy to welcome Mayor Longwell to our building.
Thank you so much. And as an extra treat, don't want to put him on the spot, we actually have the artist photographer here with us. And so thank you very much for being here. And certainly we appreciate your work, and people will have an opportunity to look around and see some nationally recognized work, and would invite the artist here in a moment if you would like to share any thoughts about this to come up. But also want to thank a couple of other folks. As mentioned, we can't do this without the support of our community and some generous donations. And so a donation by Kobe Sandlin of Sandlin Realty really helped us bring this together. And so that's very much appreciated. And so we will open up this new artist is here, and anything you would like to add? You're welcome to.
Take the podium.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I'll just briefly explain what my part of the exhibit was about. The University of Kansas got a National Science Foundation grant to study why Kansas farmers plant the crops that they plant. And their ultimate goal was trying to determine whether it was going to be economically feasible in the future to grow crops for biofuels. But in order to compile this data, they went back both historically, looking at all the records that they could, obviously looking at it currently. They sent out researchers that interviewed the farmers and asked them specific questions, but also trying to project into the future. As Patricia said, at some point somebody mentioned to them that they were collecting all the scientific data that's going to mean a lot to them, but it's not going to mean much to the general public. So they hired me to be the person that went out and put a face on the project. Who are these people they're talking about, and what are they talking about with these kind of crops? And one of the things that happened sort of coincidentally, I mean, it was definitely part of the project, but the year that I got involved with it was in 2011, which was the start of a 2-year historic drought in Kansas, drier than any summers, particularly 2012 was the driest summer in the history of record keeping in Kansas. So water became a huge part of my project. How farmers are using water, how they're conserving water, what's happening, how crops have changed because of water. And the last photograph, my first ones were, actually I did mine a few from earlier times, but I've been photographing the Kansas landscape and farmers for the last several decades. So I did take a couple earlier ones. I think there's one maybe from 2007, but primarily started in 2011, and the last photograph in this exhibition is from 2017. Along the way, I met many very gracious people that invited me into their homes and let me ride on their tractors and their combines with them and talk farmer talk.
That's awesome.
It's been quite a pleasure. Thank you.
Can we ask a couple questions?
Absolutely. So this is perfect opportunity to open it up for questions from the meeting.
Larry, if you could get back behind the podium, but watch your hands because we're hearing the tapping on our mics. Can you talk one more time just about what you saw through your lens as being maybe a challenge or a joy for Kansas farmers? What did you see through your lens? Maybe even reiterating the water aspect, since that's been such a challenge for them this year.
Well, probably the joy of it is that almost 100% of the people that I talk to really love their land and they really care about their land. One of the things that was, I think, obvious to me before I started, but it became even more obvious as I was working, was that one of the questions is, how did you get into this? And almost always the answer was, it's because of what my dad did, or what my family did. And generally it was, and his parents before it, they did. So it goes back to farming, goes back sometimes 4 or 5 generations in Kansas. Oftentimes it was, this is where the homestead was in the 1870s. Maybe the downside of part of that was that because of the way economics are now, farmers are having to consolidate and plant more because the profit margins are so much lower. And what's happening is that it's sort of forcing out the small farmers. Farmers that are being successful are the ones that are buying more and more land. As they buy more and more land, they have to buy bigger equipment, so it actually takes fewer people to farm the same amount of land, but they're getting much more production out of it. And as the production rises, the prices go down, so the profit margin still stays really slim. And I'm seeing people kind of being more disassociated with the land. Small communities are drying up because there's populations in western Kansas, where most of my work was focused towards western Kansas. Population is declining. The number of farms is definitely declining. The farms that are there are being much larger.
If you were to summarize what you hope people learn from seeing your work, what would the takeaway be that you'd want them to experience?
What I would like for them to take away is that as subtle as Kansas can be, it is incredibly beautiful. And something that I grew up on a farm in western Kansas, so I think I'm tuned into this, but there is so much to see out there, and the average person that drives through Kansas thinks there's nothing to see out there. So I'm hoping that maybe my camera helps them see what I see, and maybe they can be a little more in tune to the land.
That's great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, we appreciate you being here, and enjoy this great fall weather, and want you to also enjoy the capture of Kansas here in